she needs some help.
Okay, we good? Great. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. My name is Heidi West, and I am the head of healthcare for Zoom Communications. And just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you today, and also how honored we are to play a small role in this Congress by leveraging the Zoom events platform. Certainly welcome any feedback or interest in future Congresses or conversations in what we can do to continue making a virtual experience as close to that in-person hug as the virtual hug that Dr. Yadin mentioned earlier. But I'm going to spend a few minutes today talking briefly about the years, now it's almost 2 years of change, and then go into a little bit of why is Zoom here and why are we even part of this Congress. So first, just from a year of change perspective, I think the one that we're all obviously familiar with is how COVID and the pandemic has impacted everyone across the globe, and the shift to virtual care and just connecting took on a whole new world. And the other thing I think from a year of change, we've been talking about value-based care in this country, in the US. We've been talking about telemedicine, telehealth, virtual care. And it took this pandemic to shift gears to an area to say, do we think the consumer can handle it? Do we think the consumer would value it enough? And now it's to a point where we're saying, we need to adjust the way we provide care and the way we engage because the consumer wants it and they've proven they can handle it. So I just think this year of change, and now almost 2 years of change, has been so interesting because now we work differently. It's not just about providing care, it's how we work, how we engage, how we learn, and how we connect with our loved ones. There's some value in this pandemic in the fact that different people connected in more meaningful ways than maybe they had in years with different tools that allowed for that connection. But you may be asking, why is Zoom in this room? Why are we here today? And why are we talking to a clinical engineering group? And well, exactly, for all the things I just said, we're done. No, I think our new focus as Zoom is we are really responsible in many ways for connecting the world. We did it during the pandemic, and we take that responsibility very seriously in understanding what does that mean and what are the needs. And there is such a need to connect, whether it's the work that you're doing in this Congress today and the way that you're sharing information and focused on the certifications and the standardization and what's needed for clinical engineering in the world of healthcare. But also, I think we've all come to understand that virtual, not virtual reality, but virtual is a reality in the way it's not meant to fully replace. So a lot of times we talk about what is return to work, what is return to engagement with your providers. It's not an either or. And it's not meant to be hybrid where on Monday and Friday I work in the office and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I work from home. It's about flexibility while considering also exposure. There's a lot of concern if I work from home, I'm not going to have as much exposure to people in the office. And then there's an accessibility, making sure that you feel like you have access to all the tools that might have been back in the day when everybody was working. There is a growing need for education and learning and training in a virtual way. And I think the opportunity, again, I keep pointing back to this event, but what an amazing opportunity for people from all over the world to share information and have you collaborate in such a meaningful way. It's been humbling to be a part of this. I think it's fascinating, the work that you're doing. But there's also a growing need, as you've talked a lot over this last few days and continue, is the concept of certification. And there's a difference between education and certification. And I know in a lot of our conversations, we talk about the opportunity to continue to educate, whether it's the work you're doing today, but the need for standardization. And you think about this tsunami of clinical engineering that they want to move to the home or move outside of an acute care setting. How are we certifying and standardizing and making sure when it might be up to a family member to support a patient that you have the level of support and the right kind of people focused on the tools necessary to help somebody thriving, not just surviving, but thriving at home. And the last piece I will say is clinical engineering in and of itself is communications. You're communicating data to the health and wellness or the challenges of the patient that you're serving. So you are a communications and data platform, just as Zoom is. And I think collectively, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing at Zoom to augment the engagement, but there's a tremendous engagement and partnership potential for the needs of clinical engineering, especially as it moves outside of an acute care setting, and the work that we're doing at Zoom for healthcare. So what are we seeing? What are we hearing a lot as I'm working with clients globally? What are we hearing? And it's this concept of the hospital at home. And what does it mean to possibly do an early discharge and allow a patient to support themselves at home, possibly with home health, caregiver, combination of all of that. And I'll share a quick personal story. Just recently, my mother was in the hospital, and we don't have any specific devices, but we do have some perishable items. She has a Pleurex catheter, and I share this because I think my sister and I have both been with my mom through this whole process. We've been trained on how to do the Pleurex catheter. We have talked to home health. I took a video of them doing it. We go home. It's a different catheter that got shipped. We didn't get as many of the catheters. And then I memorized the discharge papers, and there's no one to call to figure out what do I do with this catheter. And I just keep thinking, and I knew that I was coming to this Congress, and I just kept thinking, this is just a perishable item. And I consider myself fairly intelligent enough to figure out how to support my mom's needs. But you think about dialysis in the home and real chronic diseases that you're trying to manage. It comes down to, if it goes in the home, what is the feedback loop? What is the support loop? Are people certified and understand how to support people from a clinical engineering perspective when they need support from the home? It's just something that we think about quite a bit. And I think the Zoom platform and that communications does create that feedback loop. If you think about call centers or engagements with specialists that can support when needed. I talked already about flexible work, but that goes anywhere from education, healthcare, corporate, any of the above. What could that look like, and the need to support it? There's a lot of focus around enhancing telehealth and telemedicine. During the pandemic, it was sort of a virtual visit. Just get a doctor on a call with a patient and have a conversation. But the beauty of the innovation and just the speed of innovation over the last year and a half has shown tremendous insight in how to leverage that virtual visit to provide more insight during that call. Anything from biometrics and leveraging the pixelation of the video and the high quality audio to be able to tell vitals, bring vitals into the conversation. That was probably one of the biggest pushbacks from a telehealth perspective, of not being able to know. So it's getting closer and closer to all but touching the patient. We're seeing a tremendous amount of insight into intelligent routing to get the right specialists at the right time, ad hoc, asynchronous communication within telehealth. All of these are continuing to build and grow. And I'll talk a little bit about what Zoom is doing to help drive that. I did talk a little bit about the consumer being open to quality of care. There's a lot of competition in healthcare today. There's direct to consumer, there's retail, there's a lot of these internet solutions. I was just at the health conference in Boston last week, and the entire exhibit floor was full of startups and innovation solving for a thing, a niche, a particular need. Some of them did include some clinical engineering. It was all about getting people to the home, and the concept of a consumer having to navigate through all of this, and then all of the providers and health systems trying to figure out how to tie all these pieces together. It's a pretty significant task to undo. And I mentioned increased competitive pressure specifically around how care is delivered. The Walmarts, the CVS, Aetnas of the world, especially in this country, are changing the game. We've heard Amazon wanting, they've already done the pill pack piece, but looking at how they might be the logistics behind some of the home health and driving different materials. So I think taking a step back and looking at the healthcare ecosystem globally and all the pieces that tie together, there's a need for enhanced communication and collaboration, and that's where a lot of the focus is for Zoom in healthcare. But what does that look like? I want to give you a couple imagine, if you wills, or considerations and how this is moving from just the meetings that maybe people became familiar with over the last couple of years. There's an entire concept around Zoom for home. And this is not just about you sitting in an office and having a Zoom meeting with your colleagues, but it has a lot to do with what the device can look like. So it's not you thinking you're having a virtual care session with a doctor on your laptop. You can now turn your TV in the living room into a Zoom room, allowing with a single touch and the opportunity to possibly have your caregivers or different family members joining and getting a good, broad, much broader and easier to see touch and feel of what Zoom would look like going into the home. And I'm just kind of laundry listing a handful of innovations that are going on, but wanting to serve for the art of the possible and the work that Zoom is doing in enhancing these experiences. Another one, if you think about hands-free, we had a conversation earlier about disinfectants and the need to potentially, if you think a patient's room and they want to pull up a Zoom meeting, the opportunity to leverage these different smart devices to say Zoom on or engage in communication without touching anything. This is available today. This is something that I find fascinating. I think it's amazing. And I was talking to some colleagues earlier about this today. If you remember, I talked about with flexible work, the need to have that access and exposure and feel like you're part of the conversation. With Smart Gallery, if there was one camera in this room today, and the only way you could engage is with this camera and all of us being in this room, there would be all these conversations going on, and the people that were remote would feel largely left out of the conversation or feel like there was a conversation going on over there, or they couldn't hear who was speaking. With Smart Gallery, and we have a number of different partnerships with Neat and Poly and Logitech, where it doesn't matter if you're home and there's a conference room with a group of people, they're taking individual camera streams for each person in the room. So the person at home sees the same experience that they did when we were all remote. So you'll see there's a handful of people that are in a room together, but now they're together and the person that's alone feels like they're part of the conversation. I have always felt when I was the one remote and everyone was in a conference room, I felt very disconnected. So I think about some of the collaboration that goes on and that you're all doing here today and will continue to do from all the remote places in the world. If there's a handful of people together and one or two remote, what a wonderful way to feel all connected regardless of where you are. And then I wanted to just give a little more insight into what's going on around education. A lot of people know Zoom because their kids were learning on Zoom during the pandemic. And it was a wonderful K through 12 higher ed way to continue education. But it goes well beyond that. We're all educating ourselves, our own corporations and healthcare organizations, different certifications and standardization is part of our DNA in the way that we work all day, every day. So we're enhancing what learning looks like with interactive and virtual whiteboarding, different ways to leverage polling and ways to leverage breakout rooms to create more intimate engagements. We're starting to create these concepts around the virtual waiting room so you can bring a handful of people together to have as close to the water cooler talk as you can prior to joining the meeting. So a lot of consideration going into place on what does it mean to get this kind of engagement if you're still virtual. And then I wanted to just take one quick second to talk about Zoom apps. This is something that we as an organization announced not too long ago, and I'll just paint a picture for you. So I mentioned the doctors felt like the thing they were missing were potentially the vitals or other information, and they might feel like they've got a couple different screens that they're working to have this engagement. With Zoom apps, think about if you're in a Zoom meeting, you click on a button and all the apps that you want are available within the same session. You're not having to toggle back and forth to another screen or leverage a different monitor. And if you look at a product like Echo, that's a virtual opportunity to do cardio or stethoscope, otoscope, a lot of the remote diagnostics. You could bring the Echo app into the virtual meeting and allow a doctor to have that level of engagement. I mentioned the pixelization and leveraging the high quality audio and video to bring on vitals. There's a lot of those tools that we're looking to bring in as a Zoom app, but also a lot of your the productive tools that you use in your apps. They're a handful here, but if you write notes, if you want to bring the whiteboard in, if you think about how you have your phone and all your apps and you're going back and forth, we want that same experience with video and being able to bring the different apps in as you're involved in your conversation. We're really excited about this. We have quite a few people that are building apps to be part of this solution for us. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, and also something that we just introduced, and this is something I think could be very powerful in healthcare, and specifically talking about hospital at home and the need to engage from a clinical engineering feedback loop that I talked about earlier, is Zoom's Video Engagement Center. Think of this as a contact center, but it's fully video first. So if someone is at home, like myself in my situation with my mom with the catheter, it would be amazing if I had a video contact center. I could engage with someone that could show me during that call how to use the catheter properly and feel that connection between the person on the other side and the person that might feel isolated or nervous at home. So it's a video contact center, and it ties all the different pieces of Zoom. So if you leverage Zoom for meetings or phone or chat or webinars or events like today, tying all that in with this best of experience in a contact center, we just feel that Zoom has the potential to do what we do best, which is drive the healthcare industry and really become the communications engine for healthcare. That's all I have.
Wonderful.
So thank you for your time. Was I quick? Too early?
Oh, do you want to entertain questions? Or do you
Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
Are you covering the whole world?
We are. A lot of the innovation is coming from the US base, but we are bringing up different country leaders. We now have Brazil, New Zealand, England is driving the European nations, and we're building out a broader healthcare practice as well in Asia Pac. So it's evolving, but a lot of it is coming from the US and the needs of the US. We also have a relationship with some of the different language translation and interpretive services that can get pulled right into a Zoom meeting and serve for interpretive services during that meeting.
So you will provide also translation?
We do.
Some of us are only doing about
Some
3
are
minutes for,
direct
next
translation,
session,
and some we leverage with
Q&A.
third-party integrations, but we do interpretive services, yeah, language.
Are you considering, and we saw it during this conference, are you considering having captions where
The
the
closed captioning. for the-
captioning
yes.
in real time?
Yes, we have that today. The challenge, it's not medical grade or medical grade closed caption, but we do have that today.
So, and Antonio, you're asking even translation in real time and with
Yeah,
video?
we
Translating the audio
Yeah.
with
yeah,
caption?
Caption.
We do have that today. I would need to confirm how many languages and that piece of it, but some of it, and I know you have a question.
Can you hand him the mic?
Yes, but I would like to make a question before I run to the other
Sure.
conference. Just, you talk very, it was very interesting to listen the evolution of this Zoom software and strategic issues, but what about the training the people through the Zoom and other has also changed a lot and rapidly. What could you be for you two issues regarding the training in this step you achieve already with the smart sessions and the smart camera and so on? What are two key issues to consider when we train people in a massive way? Thank you.
Are you saying how you train them on Zoom or how you're leveraging Zoom to train them on
The
something
second
else?
one. The
Second one.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I got the question right. It really plays back to a lot of the work that we're doing in our education. I run healthcare. We also have an education vertical, and a lot of the focus has to do with I mentioned earlier, leveraging breakout rooms, leveraging the whiteboard, leveraging a lot of third-party learning management systems from a education, K through 12 higher ed, but then also because we're an open platform and have open APIs and SDKs, if there's any kind of application or need that you have training that has a platform, it can be brought into Zoom to provide that level of integration for what you're using from education. I would need to know specifically some of the areas that you'd want to leverage, but the exposure itself and using the tool for education. And one of the things I had talked about at the beginning around leveraging for certifications, we even have some solutions looking at us for CMEs for continuing med education. It is a wonderful platform to be able to have a one-to-many and a many-to-many within the same virtual platform.
Yadin has a question about certification and
Yes, thank you very much, Heidi, for the informative presentation.
Thank you.
We apologize that there is a session we need to start and be there a couple minutes
That's okay.
ahead, but a couple short items. One is if you're making a global thank you, grazie, toda, those should be in the indigenous languages. Toda should be in Hebrew letters, not in English. That reflect much better the collaboration, but the essence of my question to you would be on professional development.
Mm-hmm.
There are some natural path that you move forward. You improve telemedicine, hospital at home, the personal example you gave with your mother and the catheters, typical. There are things that you say, will never happen, at least not in my lifetime. So if you jump into professional credentialing, where you're saying, well, I need these cadavers and all these slides in the lab and looking into pathology, I'm jumping into the clinical engineers that has to go through an internship on medical devices in use at the point of care. And I'm saying how nice it will be if you can provide that environment, not just the platform, but the environment, just like you did with the presenting the virtual presence, regardless if you're at home, at the office, everybody is together and there are no people at the end, the far end of the table. That would be very nice. And I would like to hear more about where that might be going.
I would need to learn more about the specifics of it, but I think about the airline industry, and initially the concept of to be certified as a pilot, it meant taking your solo flight after a bunch of flights with somebody else. And now all the training that happens in the commercial airline is done in simulators, and then they just have a checkoff ride. So Imagine with the capabilities around machine learning and leveraging potential simulations or different lab type environments that provide that level of contact virtually. I'm not saying it's here today, but if you look to other industries that might be a little bit ahead of the innovation and how they're training and engaging, the same potential could apply in this industry as well. It's just a matter of understanding who is out there building some of those simulations we could take advantage of.
Thank you.
I have, firstly, you made an excellent presentation.
Thank
This is really very good, very interesting, very informative. You know, we can think about several applications. That's very good. And I know Zoom is used extensively in academia, you know. A couple of questions, you know, one is pertaining to privacy and recording. So as a host, I can record, but, you know, is there a way somebody can get into the system and record also, or you have some real tight firewalls and they cannot do it?
We are very serious about security at Zoom. There's a lot of focus on making sure security and privacy are at the forefront of everything that we do. The admin console, so the management console that your IT organization would be supporting, there's a tremendous amount of gates of access and who you want access for any number. If they have their own Zoom account, do you want them to be able to record? We have the ability to have, we enable HIPAA compliance on our solution, but there are some organizations that still don't want their doctors recording, so they'll lock that down. So it's all very customizable, and the management console, the admin console we have is really intuitive and quite easy to set up. So once you built the parameters, no one's getting into your information, and you can go so far as to determine what you want different access groups to have access to within your own organization. So there are a tremendous amount of gates and privacy and all of the things that you would expect. We also have something, just as an FYI, if you click up in the top left-hand corner, you'll see a shield with a checkbox. Any Zoom meeting, I'm looking at it right now here. You can click on it and it will show you which data centers it's leveraging for the call that you're on. And you can even decide for the different countries if you want to leverage the data, because we're a completely decentralized data center. We're all over the world. And Canada, as an example, likes everything coming from Canada, so they stay within their own data centers. A lot of the people in the US prefer to choose which data centers they can use. So we even go so far as to where the data goes and any of the insight.
You see the notes?
All the chats for the Q&A
Q&A.
One was specific to the comment.
priority.
Must have been, so Elliot made a comment, must be in chat.
Well, I see one, I'll check chat next. Can you comment on the possibility of having designated bandwidth priority for healthcare purposes? This is probably one of the most important things that I think sets Zoom apart from a collaboration platform. We were built intentionally for video. So we're not coming from phone or another solution and then trying to make video is the hardest communication. It's the most complex from the compression algorithms and the responsibility. And our solution, if you look at, and I have a bunch of different graphs that show how well Zoom even performs in low bandwidth versus maybe some of our peers in the market. So being able to throttle down different bandwidth for certain needs, I would need to confirm what that would look like. But I wanted to start by saying how Zoom is known for how well we perform in low bandwidth. We have a telehealth solution out in some of the far reaches of Alaska that's running on 3G for their telehealth solution in some of the tribal networks. And it's performed for a number of years for them. So I would need to get back to Fred specifically on, can you throttle back the bandwidth? But our bandwidth itself has proven to be pretty supported. And then would the video management center have a centralized station to run different areas? All of that is configurable in wanting to understand if you have different IT staff in different parts of the organization. If you want to have more people have access to the management console, it's all in the cloud. So it's really configurable in who you want to have access, and it doesn't matter where they are. So I think I might
I
have.
have two short questions. One is on archival, how long do you keep it? I mean, how long can the information be made available? That's one. And the other one is on the quality of images. There new versions which are improving the quality of images. There's short answers will do, because I think you have another session.
The how long you want to keep it is up to you. We obviously have some significant requirements from a HIPAA need in the US of children, I believe, under the age, you have to have everything up to 18 and then 7 years beyond that. So we're able to support those requirements. It really comes down to what you want and how long you want it. You can also determine whether or not you want people to save it to the cloud or allow them to save it on their computer. Most people defer to cloud because it does allow for a lot broader, obviously, support from storage. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second question?
But it was the quality of images, particularly we start about medical images, the resolution,
Right.
the better resolution is good for telemedicine.
That is continuing to evolve. I think what you need more than anything there is the quality of the hardware that's driving the image. So if you're a 1080 and beyond of what your needs are, even more so, but you're working on a hardware platform that doesn't allow for that, it would obviously defer to the lowest resolution quality. But Zoom continues to work with some of the camera manufacturers and the image, the back end stuff to make sure that you can get probably not to diagnosis, but certainly monitoring and an opportunity to really see what the needs are with the images.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I
I
have
have the
a
same question
question.
Daniel, about the storage and the time.
Oh, okay.
It's okay, thank you.
Yes, no problem. Yes, sir.
I have a very specific area of interest about Zoom. The reason I manage the communication platform for a worldwide retirees association. And the elder you get, the more limitations of any type you have for communication.
Sure.
Does Zoom has specific products or specific features in the system that allow people with limitations to communicate from, let's say, a standalone device just for Zoom to whatever other characteristic you could include?
Yeah, happy to answer that. We don't necessarily have a specific specific client for the elderly. We are looking at different user interfaces that would remove some of the buttons that are unnecessary and then make the buttons that are there bigger with the writing bigger. That's not just for the elderly. We've heard different possible brain injuries or autism or other disabilities where there's a need for color coding the buttons and the writing being bigger. And there's not a need necessarily for knowing how many participants are on a call. So we'll remove a lot of those buttons and then just bring up the start meeting, mute, and leave to make it. So from that perspective, that we're looking at bringing in different user interfaces. But the other thing I would say is Zoom is the same platform that a lot of the elderly felt comfortable using with their own families and staying connected. And I use my mom as a test case. If my mom, who's almost 80 years old, can use Zoom and she Zooms with her girlfriends and they have their conversations, what are the friction points for her? And then we continue to innovate to remove any of the different friction points. The different user interface would be an example of that.
And that could be mixed in one conference.
It could be, absolutely. We can look at different potential needs and see what we could do. we may be able to leverage different third parties as apps or marketplace to see if there's a way that we can make it super simple for everyone. But I think the beauty of Zoom, and one of the things that I'm probably the most excited about on the platform, is how simple it is. And it's pretty intuitive.
I'm sorry, this conversation, but it needs to be to a third party provider, or is direct?
It's all Zoom.
So.
Yeah.
But we need to.
Yeah, I would love to
Zooms
learn.
With the specifics.
Yes, and I can help you with that and figure out how best to accomplish that and what some of the limitations are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I threw this in chat too, but I'm really curious, from a healthcare organization perspective, how is Zoom Health differentiating itself? Oh, sorry. How is Zoom Health kind of differentiating itself as a platform in the market compared to some of the other kind of big names we hear, specifically as a telehealth platform? Like, what's the differentiator between Zoom Health, for instance, if you compare it to something like Teladoc? Like, what could you help me understand the value proposition?
And there's a couple of things. I think first and foremost, it's the same client, that the general client is the same client that they would also use for administrative work or engaging internally with their own people. So I think not having to have multiple platforms, whether they're using it for other reasons besides engaging with a patient or in care. So that's one thing, that's kind of foundational. But I think the other piece, specifically with the Teladocs and the Amwells of the world, I think there's a lot of other pieces to the way they run their business, and they're leveraging third-party doctors, and they're leveraging per specialty. And when the pandemic happened, the health systems wanted to use their own docs and their own engagement. And I think the fact that Zoom's client is the same client, whether you're talking to a urologist or you're talking to a cardiologist or a psychologist for behavioral health, it's the same platform, and there's no associated fees with each specialty. So I think the simplicity and the enterprise-wide capability of Zoom is one area. And then I think the other piece that really allowed it to thrive through the pandemic are the integrations that we've done to different EHRs. So we were already integrated into Epic prior to the pandemic. And being integrated means when a doctor pulls up Hyperspace for the day, they click on the Zoom icon and they're in the meeting with so there's no having to track people down. There's a lot more people that are now integrated with these EHRs, so we know we're not the only ones. But then I'll go to the third thing that I think is really important, is having our open APIs and SDKs and being able to bring in the other applications that you do run your health on. So I mentioned interpretive services. I mentioned some of the ability to do the vitals, and a lot of those pieces also allow for the same experience by augmenting it by bringing some of these other integrations. There was a interpretive services Stratus that was a very easy drill down menu, click, and you're in. So things like that, I think just the simplicity, and anywhere we see friction, we remove it.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
I'm good. Do I end?
Just say thank you, and I don't know if there's any questions.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I know that went a little long, more questions than I anticipated, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much.